the last 3 months, because of COVID-19, schools have been shut. I hope that these materials that we present today will be beneficial to students in their final year of secondary or high school.
We are all welcome to today's biology class, meant for students of secondary schools and colleges. We are continuing from where we stopped during our previous lesson that took place on pollination. Today, God's willing, we are continuing from where we stopped. And during our previous lesson, we were able to learn the meaning of pollination as the transfer of pollen grains that are matured from the anthers of plants or flowering plants to the stigma of same plants or flowering plants, or to another plant that is closely related in terms of species. And we have also learned about the various types of pollination that we have under the same subtopic, pollination. Today, we are going to be looking at something different. What we are going to be looking at include the conditions or devices that aid self-pollination. So this is what we are going to look at today, God's willing. I wish you a happy viewing. The objectives of today's lesson are, God's willing, by the end of today's class, our learners should be able to mention the conditions or devices which aid self-pollination. Secondly, to know the advantages and disadvantages of self-pollination, and again, to briefly, wherever they are going to be asked, discuss or explain homogamy and cleistogamy as part of the devices that aid self-pollination. Now, we are going to look at these conditions. What are these conditions? Naturally, we have plants that their conditions for self-pollination only take place as a result of what have been termed as homogamy and cleistogamy. We are going to look at these two variables individually. What is homogamy? Homogamy refers to the ripening of the anthers and stigmas of a bisexual flower at the same time. Under this condition, self-pollination may occur. What this is telling us here is, we know that anthers refer to the word male gametes, while stigmas refers to female gametes. Here, we have seen this word bisexual, meaning a single plant having these two reproductive parts or gametes on itself. What happens under homogamy is when these two reproductive gametes, anthers and stigmas, are ripe or are ready or are fully matured for them to what? Mixed or come together and fertilized themselves, it is then referred to as homogamy. That is self-fertilization of a plant using the two reproductive or sex gametes, the anthers and stigmas. And this homogamy occurs in the following ways. For instance, for homogamy to occur, that is the ripening of the anthers and the stigma at the same time, that is simultaneously, a gentle breeze or air or wind, for instance, but here breeze specifically, may blow the mature pollen grains, which may be what? Shed off or shed on matured stigmas that are situated just below the anthers. So when a wind or breeze blows, it makes the pollen grains that are mature to fall off, and as a result of that, they what? By nature or default, partly or holistically or completely, fall down into the stigmas. This is one of the ways homogamy what takes place. In other words, the anthers come in contact at the same time by the help of the breeze that what blows. Secondly, a visiting insect may transfer the pollen grain which is matured or which are matured to the same flower. An insect might have landed on the pollen grains, fed itself, and ongoing, and as it is naturally, because it has landed, its legs will carry along, or its beak or mouth will pick along some of these pollen grains, and on landing on the stigmas, these pollen grains that have been picked could be what? Deposited in the stigmas, thereby aiding self-pollination, specifically homogamy. Number 3, self-pollination may also occur when mature stigmas push their way in and out of the what? Corolla or corolla tube, during which they are brushed against the anthers, and the process, or in the process, pollen grains are collected. What happens here is, by default, when they are growing, at a point when they are mature, that is the stigma, as a result of the growth they experience, and when blowing again, they now tend to what? Collide or mix or come in contact with the anthers, and these anthers that have pollen grains on them already will now what? Mixed with the stigma, leading to the process of what? Fertilization and reproduction subsequently. Number 4, a situation where the filaments are longer than the stigma. The filaments may recoil to touch the mature stigma. What this is telling us is the filaments, which I'm going to show you later on in one of the diagrams that we have for today's lesson, is going to be longer than the stigma, and as a result of its height, naturally is going to now fold itself in a coily manner, such that in the process of the coiling, it touches, or the filaments touch the stigmas, thereby landing on the stigmas the pollen grains. So this is what happens also. Number 5 is self-pollination, and in like manner, like it happens in number 4 above, may occur where the styles again, which is another part, when they are longer than the filaments, the styles may also bend or recoil to make the stigmas touch the anthers. So this is what happens in this process or under homogamy. The next one is cleistogamy. In cleistogamy, the word simply refers to a situation or condition which pollen grains are deposited on the stigma, which becomes ripened at the same time. In other words, as a result of the deposition of the what? The pollen grains on the stigma, that now makes the stigmas to become ripe instantly at that time together under this condition. This situation usually occurs among closed flowers, that is bisexual flowers, which never open at all. Now we are going to look at the advantages of self-pollination. One of the advantages of self-pollination is it ensures a sure way of ensuring pollination has taken place, especially in bisexual flowers. Because it happens on its own and by itself, it ensures, or it makes sure that in terms of pollination, this plant does not deny itself pollination. Secondly, it may not waste pollen grains. When wind blows, for instance, it carries away these pollen grains, some of which just deposit themselves by the influence of the what? Wind, or according to the direction of the wind. Sometimes it falls off on the ground without it becoming viable or useful. So in self-pollination, this kind of a thing does not happen. Since it is going to fall off on its own, it has naturally been designed such that it goes into it carefully without waste of the pollen grains. The next point is going to be the disadvantages of self-pollination. One is self-pollination leads to the production of weak offspring as a result of continuous or repeated self-pollination. What this is telling us is, it is the same thing that is going to be what? Given in terms of pollination, and the result is going to be the same result. You never give the same thing and expect different thing. It is what is given in continuously that comes out. So if these pollen grains of this kind of plants or flowers become problematic or diseased, or they are not viable, genetically good, certainly in their generation, at a point there would be what? All these change that will lead to the offspring being what? Deprived of some certain things genetically. Secondly, the offspring or individual produced are less adaptive to the environment. They have now become used to the environment such that because they are weak, the environment in which they are going to live, it's going to be difficult to survive there because of the weakness as a result of genetic deformation, as a result of repeated self-pollination. The next thing we are going to look at is as I said earlier on during the explanation of homogamy and cleistogamy, we are now going to look at the diagrammatic or pictorial examples of all these self-pollination or some of the self-pollination, how they happen or how they are represented from the next slide. You look at this diagram, you go downward, you see on this, for instance, if you look at this diagram, we've made mention of the word filaments. We've been using filaments, anther, style, and stigma. So you look at, this is the stigma, down it goes, you look at it here. While this is the style, look at the style. From this cursor or pointer, you look at it. Then we have our anther. Our anther, you look at it. This is a typical example of an anther. Then we have our filaments. This is one of the things we've said earlier on. When they are long, that is longer than the stigma. Here is the stigma. If this filament is longer than this stigma, it recoils itself. That is when it goes to, for instance, this position, it will coil or recoil itself such that the pollen grains or the anthers will not be deposited into this stigma and they become what? Fused, and then fertilization is going to what? Take place. So this is how it is. Then the next slide here, you look at it, you see we have self-pollination here. We've been mentioning pollen grains. You look at the pollen grains here. You look at them. Look at the pollen grains. You see them here? This is how they are. And these pollen grains or pollens come from what? Loose stamens. If you go backward, you see, look at what is referred to as stamen here. So our pollen grains come from what? Loose stamens. And the stamen include what? The anther and the filament. So this is how it works. And below we have our what? Reference. With this, we've come to the end of today's class. Hoping to be with you very soon. Remain blessed. Until then, thank you and bye.